Good afternoon, everyone. It's 2:13, and I call to order the meeting for the Orange County Sewer District Number 1 Advisory Committee. A copy of the agenda for this meeting may be found on the county website under the tab for the legislature. Please silence your phones and electronic devices. And at this time, I please ask you to rise to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Kelly, can you do a roll call?
Yes. Ava? Nellie? Jeannie?
Here.
Ellers?
Here.
Hotel? Here.
Okay, we have a quorum. All right, up first, we have, the first item is Rich Golden, County Attorney. I don't see him here, and I think, Joe Mahoney is here, Senior Assistant County Attorney. We have Eric Tenenga, the Commissioner of Parks, the Commissioner of Parks, the Commissioner of Department of Public Works. Anthony is not here, and Mary Beth Coney, and,
Okay.
Bob Gregg. That's it. All right, and we'll, with that, we'll go on to item number 1A. If you guys can come on down.
So some, price is right. As usual, killing trees. Thank you. This is not an exciting document, don't get excited.
Okay, just before we start, I just want to give everybody a little update on, with those deadlines we discussed, different things. Katie Benelli and myself signed a letter, we sent it up to the DEC and trying to just get us on the radar for it. Mary Beth, I think you said that they reached out to you, they received it, and so we were heard in that aspect. So with that, if you want to go on.
Yeah, actually, that was one of the things that was kind of on my topic list. So, excuse me, the legislature made a comment to the state on some of the proposed rules that they're using regarding some of the new funding that's coming out that was the result of the bipartisan infrastructure law, which was adopted in November of 2021. The Environmental Facilities Corporation did reach back out to say that they had received the letter and they wanted to get a better understanding of kind of where we were in the process. So I provided them with our schedule that we've been working from so that they were aware, and that's the same schedule that you all have seen. They were aware of where we were. The one thing that they did state, and this is something I had on my list to talk to you guys about today, was because we have a facility plan, we have completed, with the exception of something called smart growth assessment, what's needed to be done to list the project for financing on the Clean Water State Revolving Fund intended use plan. So I'll take a step back and just remind everybody what that is. The state revolving funds are a federal program that provides grants and low-cost loans to communities across the nation to build water and sewer infrastructure. On the sewer side of the world, the program is called the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. Clean water is a euphemism for sewer. So the way that those programs work is annually Congress appropriates funds to the states. The states that's competitive. The states do have to justify why they need those funds. The states receive those funds. They also leverage, these are leveraged financings. So they use things like interest accrued and fees that are paid by communities to create a true revolving fund. That includes both grants and low-cost loans available to municipalities and some other public entities that provide water and sewer services. When the federal government gives states money, they would like to know what you intend to do with the money. And with the SRF, there's an annual process called the intended use plan, which is a written document that describes the rules of the road for how the funding will be utilized by the state, how the state will leverage its money to provide the match, how certain aspects of the programmatic requirements will be met in terms of things like green infrastructure, accessibility of the programmatic funds to low-income communities, environmental justice communities. There's a whole series of criteria. A big chunk of the intended use plan, you have about 20 pages that are kind of the rules of the road. And then the rest of it is literally a list of projects that are competing to get low-cost financing and grants through the program. So to be listed for consideration, to be ranked and scored against the programmatic criteria for SRF, two things are required: an engineering report that meets the state's criteria. They change it frequently, every year, just to be convenient. And lastly is something called a smart growth assessment, which is a form, and that's a New York State requirement. The state has recently changed the way that listing projects occurs. On the clean water side of the world, it's actually kind of convenient. It happens now all online as a digital process. Do something called PLUS, which is the Project Listing and Update System. Make that up. That's what it stands for. Through the PLUS system, it is an online system. The SRF program, because it starts with federal funds, operates on a federal fiscal year. So the federal fiscal year starts on October 1st, ends on September 30th of every year. And New York State has determined that in order to be listed on the intended use plan for federal fiscal year 2024, which starts on October 1st of 2023, applications or listings, so engineering reports and those smart growth assessments have to be submitted to the state through this PLUS system by June 16th, which is about a month from today. When I was discussing this with the Environmental Facilities Corporation, I said, well, we have this facility plan. It's way beyond the criteria that you require for this listing. And I think executing a smart growth assessment by the county has a staff that does these things is not a tremendous effort. The EFC did encourage listing the project for financing. So the question would be, so once you have gone online and done your submission, what does that mean? It does not commit the county to do anything in particular. It is a recognition that the county may be looking for funds through the state revolving fund program in the future. Those funds come either in a combination of market rate subsidized financing, something called hardship financing, which is zero interest financing for a long period of time, and grants and principal forgiveness. It's not a commitment, but it is a way to evaluate how competitive the project might be relative to the criteria that are established in the intended use plan for the SRF program for federal fiscal year 2024, as well as versus all the other projects that are similarly situated. The way that the SRF categorizes projects is it puts them into community size, so that small communities are competing against small communities, medium-sized communities are competing against medium-sized communities. New York City gets its own list because it has a population of over 1 million. And then there are some other segments of the program that are specific, they're very programmatic. So they're green infrastructure, other kinds of programmatic projects. So if the county were to decide, and I know the county has a group of folks who we were just recently communicating, who do the grant work here. What would happen would be that, again, with no obligation of the county to do anything, the project would be listed by the county creating a PLUS account. If you don't already have one, you may very well have one because you do SRF borrowing. Be uploading the engineering report. We would need to, I think it meets all of the criteria. There may be a few minor things that we might want to tweak. But, and that smart growth assessment prior to June 16th, and I will say I would recommend quite a bit prior to June 16th because there's going to be a lot of internet traffic on that PLUS website, and you want to make sure that you're in by the deadline. And then your project, the county's preferred project, which is the upgrade from 6 to 9 million gallons on the Harriman site, as well as the expansion of the collection system for conveyance to the Harriman site, would be listed on the intended use plan in category B, and you would be able to see how competitive the project would be for grants and low cost financing. there's a draft intended use plan that is generally issued in the late summer, where you would see project will be ranked, you would see what the competition is, you would see how much money is available in category B, and that's for communities of this size. So you have some ideas there, and then on October 1st, they would produce the final intended use plan. And then because your project would be listed on what's called the annual list, meaning that you have submitted an engineering report smart growth assessment in federal fiscal year 2024, you would be eligible to advance the project towards financing, actually apply for financing if you chose to do so. There are a number of hurdles that you would have to overcome to get there. Attorney Mahoney has mentioned on a number of occasions this project is subject to County Law Article 5C.
Okay.
5A, which is regarding increase or improvement of the facility. So there's some other hoops to jump through, but because the timing of these programs is annual, and so you're opening the door to a financing potentially in fiscal year 2024. You're not saying you're definitely doing it, but you are giving yourself the flexibility, because once the IUP closes, they do amendments throughout the year, but there's no guarantee that there will be amendments to the IUP. And there's no guarantee that when they do those amendments, that they're not just strictly programmatic, but they actually open the door to listing new projects. So the implication being, if you are positioned, and the EFC did encourage the county to submit a listing before June 16th of this year. You've done all of the work really to do that. It's a very minor step to get to that point. That will open the door for you to consider other forms of financing in federal fiscal year 2024. If you choose not to do that, it is not the end of the world, but generally speaking, we can only plan on there being one time a year that the intended use plan is open for listings, and that is this time every year. So you would be putting yourselves a year out, which is, again, not the end of the world, and things can advance. But that's just something, that's a big topic to talk about.
So are we, so let's say we get that in for June 16th, and we still have the option open to go forward, but we get on the list.
Mhm.
And then are we, if nothing really happens in 2024, if we're not ready to go for financing, do we have to go and reapply every year?
That's a great question. So that's a terrific question. So what they have been doing in the past, that list of projects was extremely long. People would list projects and they would stay on there for decades and not advance. The state has really gotten their arms around that process. If we list in 2024, for federal fiscal year 2024, which starts on October 1st of this year, in the spring of next year, you will receive an email. There'll be an authorized user of your Plus system, whoever that person is somewhere in the county, will get an email saying, okay, we're starting to think about federal fiscal year 2025. If you are not intending on submitting an application for financing in 2024, do you want to stay on the list? Yes or no? If you do want to stay on the list, that's fine. You can stay on the list with the materials and information you submitted. Do you want to make any updates? And what we definitely suggest people do is look at the project budgets relative to changes that are going on or that we can anticipate that are going out there in the world in terms of the inflation in construction and materials costs that we've seen. So there's an opportunity in the spring of next year around this time to look at whatever figures are put in. Again, it'll be a year from now.
Current day figures.
Right, and say, yes, we'd like to stay on the list. We're not ready necessarily to apply for financing, but we would like to update some aspects of our listing, which could be an amendment to the engineering report. It could be changing the project cost. It could be changing the schedule. Maintaining that listing on the intended use plan has a lot of value because once you're there, you sort of check the box on requirements. You're kind of in that basket of requirements because the requirements of these programs keep changing. And rather than you having to catch up and constantly figure out what are the new reapply, right? To maintain it makes a lot of sense and gives you a lot of flexibility as you go down the road. So that's good. That was a good question.
Good. Legislator Cheney.
So there's a scoring mechanism that
There is.
occurs to create the list. Is there an opportunity after that's been released to get a debrief?
So we already know what the scoring criteria are. And one of the things that we often do when we submit these is we actually score ourselves. We say, we think we should get points for this and that and the other thing. And we justify that. And part of that is because we know our project extremely well. The agency who receives these gets hundreds of them. They don't necessarily know your project that well. So we sort of like to advocate for points. We don't always get them, but we like to advocate for those points. One point, and I know Mr. Zakadin has brought this up a couple of times, and I did discuss this with the PFC. There is in the world of what you're scored on, let's say 90% of the scoring is on environmental issues, environmental benefit, or addressing, longstanding environmental issues, water quality, those kinds of things. About 10% of it is the ability to pay for the project. So as we know, we have a community that we serve that's both inside the county sewer district as well as the neighboring communities that is highly varied in terms of demographics and the ability to pay. The Environmental Facilities Corporation has come up with a methodology that right now they're applying in Westchester County for the county sewer system. I don't know if people are familiar with that. Westchester County has a number of different county sewer districts. They have 5 wastewater treatment plants. The communities that are tributary to those various collection systems and wastewater treatment plants are highly varied, from very, very, very needy communities to very, very wealthy communities, all going to the same pipe. So they've been using a methodology to blend the incomes for that ability to pay scenario. So that would be something that we would want to do some math on as we consider making this submission. That's the engineering reports generally are very dry and boring and very engineering report. And you usually in a regular community that's one community, you'd say, and our median household income is this, and here's what we're paying for sewer today, and here's the burden on the taxpayers. Here it's a little more sophisticated than that. We've obviously looked at that, but that we would want to include so we can again say in that aspect of the scoring, because if we have a community that shows high need that is contributory of a lot of the wastewater to the system, that should be considered rather than just taking everybody across the board and saying, well, we've got 9, add 9 numbers up, divide by 9, and you get an average. That's not really indicative of who's using the system and who benefits from it. So it's like a weighted average, right? Right. So that's a great question. And I can send everybody the scoring criteria. It's things like, is your water body that you discharge to on a list where it is a protected water body because of water quality concerns? And this gets back, we talked last year a lot about this 303D listing of the Ramapo, right? So now it's not officially listed, but it's on that list of impaired water bodies to be listed. That gets you points. If you don't have that and you're just discharging to say, a stream or a water body that doesn't have those types of restrictions, you don't get those points, you get 0. We will get more points because we are discharging to a body that even though it's not, fully on the impaired list that EPA has agreed to, it is what the state believes it meets the criteria, and that gets you points. So I can send everyone those. It's things like, unfortunately, maintenance does not really get you a lot of points. But to the extent that we have conveyance issues, we want to make sure that the wastewater stays in the pipe and gets to the treatment plant, gets fully treated and out into the environment as clean water. We get points for saying we are addressing conveyance issues through this project. So there's ways that we can build the points, but I can send everyone the criteria. It's only a couple pages.
Is I&I a good thing or a bad thing relative to the points for conveyance?
So I&I is in there. Unfortunately, it's one of these things where there's a presumption by the federal government and even the state government that addressing I&I is something that you are simply required to do, and it's just sort of duty of standard of care for you to do this. You're just supposed to be doing it as an underlying action of being a speedies permittee. So you get some points, but you don't get a lot of points.
And then what about, you said maintenance doesn't float well
Yeah.
with points, but I mean, we're big expansion, so that's the primary focus of this, and I would expect there are a lot of systems that are either upgrading technology or expanding or a combination of the two. How does the point system and the allocation of points deal with
So,
expansion?
yeah, so that's a good question. So where we will get the most points is that we have an order on consent. We will automatically get a lot of points because we're going to be doing things that address the order on consent. We have a speedies permit that has a timetable of compliance in it that requires that we do things that are the things that we are doing that are in the project. We will get a lot of points for that. We will get points for being a system that is serving more than one community. Shared services is a really important aspect of this intermunicipal agreement. So we're going to get points for all of those things. This funding, when it originates at the federal government, is part of the Clean Water Act. So it's under the EPA, it's under the Clean Water Act, under Section 212. So the onus, the genesis of this money is water quality protection. Expanding to support economic development is not an area where you get points under these programs. But if you are addressing these other environmental quality issues and you need to expand to, again, because not expanding and having there be continued growth in your system is a deleterious effect on the environment because now you can't convey and treat all the wastewater that's generated. So they're related, but it's not a leading factor of driving points when we look at how the projects are scored. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
No, I'm gonna take a question from Mr.
Thank you.
Downey.
You have a consensus of that?
I said, I'm the chairman.
Okay, just a couple of points that I want to help submit the best application. So give a few points and ask a few questions. Longevity is like $50 million of this total project. Is it worthwhile submitting one application for longevity and one application for the additional capacity, having it like two separate IUP listings, two separate scores?
So so the plan has changed a little bit relative to that. So if we were to look at the current plan to expand the plant, there would be, the longevity portion of that has been reduced significantly because of the way the footprints of the structures are now taking up trains 1 and 2, essentially, right? So in the original analysis that we did, I think in 2015, that's a long time ago, there was a question about timing of when expansion was going to occur and how much expansion was going to happen. And there was are there things that you should be doing in the short term while you're considering expansion? And that was the sort of the longevity concept. We are now at a point, and I know that if Anthony were here, he could discuss the RATC analysis that he does, right? What does that stand for?
Reservation.
It's available treatment capacity, right? It's available treatment capacity has now been significantly diminished. So it does not, we are continuing to include and discuss a longevity option in the environmental impact statement. It's certainly in the engineering report, but it does not seem to be a reality to think that you're going to invest that type of money and stay at 6 million gallons a day, and then 5 or 6 years from now decide that you're going to make a bigger plant, because that would be kind of the implication of that. So I think it's a good question, but strategically, I think we have to address the speedies, we have to address the consent order, we have to address the way the project is, from a technical perspective, very integrated now, makes it much less attractive to separate the project.
So let me just fill in the legislature's why I asked the question, because even though for listing, the amount doesn't really matter from a state point of view, but there are like RIA grants, which is like $3 million per project. If you have multiple projects, it's multiple times $3 million. There's different types of grants that has a maximum cap. if the project is $100 million, you could only be eligible for 5 million from this pot. If there's multiple pots, you have multiple opportunities for the grants.
So they, for WIA, which this project's not ready to submit this year, because it hasn't done all the things that need to be done. I believe that they've changed that, so it's up to 25 million and it's 5 million a year, every year up to the cap. So it's a much larger pot, because of exactly this issue, right? Folks were being forced to take integrated projects, divide them into smaller projects so that they could continue to get grant awards. That's not really good from an administrative perspective, it's not good from a construction, that's not really so I believe that that's been changed to be more inclusive of these very large mega projects, because if you look on this list right now, there's a lot of projects that are well into, the types of dollars that we're talking about here. We can certainly talk to the state about the strategy of, is there a way to list this? Is it better to list multiple projects? Usually one of the issues with listing multiple projects is then you also dilute the points that you get for things like addressing regulatory issues, those kinds of things, because you can sort of only use that card once. You can only play that card once, there's only 52 in the deck. So we kind of, there's a strategy there. But again, the EFC is aware of the scope of the project, and they did recommend listing the project as a whole on the intended use plan.
I want to encourage the county staff. Consent orders by the DEC is critical in getting scores. The more consent orders we could attach to this project, the better off you're going to be. If there are 5 or 6 consent orders that this project may fall under, make sure that Medibet has that, because that is a key factor. In addition to that, adding capacity to above 85%, in our instance here, is ordered by a judge. We have a court order that we have to add capacity above 85. That should be given. I could share that court order with you, Medibet, as well.
It's in the environmental impact statement, in fact.
Okay.
So we're there.
So for
Yep.
purposes of getting points, that's important. Another issue that we raised last time was, should the application be listed for the district and Newton, or should it be listed for the district only? This is more of a question for Joe Mahoney. I believe that as of right, only the district properties have the right to the capacity that we're building. For purposes of grant applications, we're much better off if we list only the district, because the Curious Joe factor, which is economic, comes into play. How they measure, and I'll let Medibet explain that better, but how they measure hardship is based on the O&M cost today versus the O&M cost if the district has to pay back $150 million bond. We don't have O&M bills to the Moodle communities. That's a contractual relationship where Moodle pays into the county's coffers, but it won't affect the O&M cost. You want to be able to divide grant versus hardship law versus regular loan, and how that's going to impact each individual O&M payer. And the smaller the area is, the better off you are.
Yeah, EFC is I asked them to send me the methodology they're using for Westchester, so that we can see how they did the math. Because Westchester has a kind of similar circumstance where they're doing these blended service areas, trying to understand how they did that math.
But the fact that the Moodle communities are only contractually taking service, you have no indication of how many of them are going to increase their need, how many of them are going to need extra capacity. It's totally in the blind. You may have 5 Moodle communities and only one of them are going to take advantage of the extra capacity, but all 5 are going to be diluting our number when it comes to hardship.
Yeah, so we're gonna,
And Westchester does not have the same situation. Westchester has in the district and out of the district, all of them obligated to take capacity. It's not by their own wish or by their own decision. Here, it's going to be a negotiation with each Moodle community separately, if they even want to buy in. In fact, the last increase we did in 2006, it was only Woodbury that opted to contract for additional capacity. All other wooded communities have not opted to use it and have opted not to pay. They're not sharing in the cost of the bond issue that the county has issued in 2006. None of them. Why should they be just diminishing our chances of getting grants and hardship?
Right, we're gonna do the math so that it has the best advantage.
Good.
So,
And,
That's my point.
I just, Joe, aren't we working with Mudna? Isn't legal working with Mudna to try as far as, intermunicipal agreements and things, trying to update that?
We've looked into the issue. We're not quite there yet in terms of updating. There's a few more steps we need to look at. And what Mr. Seguin was talking about is one of the issues that was going through my mind. Is the when. And whether it's going to ultimately become necessary. There's a number of legal issues that need to be resolved also. That I'm not going to talk about right now.
Okay, all right.
So I guess I don't know, I know you sent me recently, an email. I don't, so from our perspective, if you guys want to do an SRF listing, we need you to tell us that you want to do that so we can provide your people who would do the actual listing, the information that they need to do so. And again, you're not committing to anything, you're listing a project, which opens the opportunity for potential financing down the road.
Yeah, I think we get the input from the committee, but I think that we would be in favor of doing that. Seems like it makes sense what was explained to us, and our planning department can, I can speak directly with them and then assist.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's not a lot of work.
right, the emails that Mary Beth are referring to, one's between myself and the planning department notifying us of grant opportunities. And then I was in the need for the county to submit all the application directly, not Delaware,
Yeah.
but to have the Delaware.
Yeah,
So we were just talking about
that's
that
what I was
process,
about,
right?
Joe, did you have something else?
No, thank you.
Okay, and, just move along a little bit. Are you okay, Mary Beth?
Yeah, I just, you mentioned earlier about the, when last we met, we were waiting for some sampling information and we were waiting for some commentary from legal on the variance. We received both of those within the last week or 4 or 5 days. So we are now, we now have those in hand. We now can complete the variance for submission to the DEC. This is in response to the notice of incomplete application. And we also have the sampling information, which is related to that. And that means we can get everyone. So what you have in front of you, I said this is not a very exciting document. This is the draft of an executive summary for the draft environmental impact statement. It's rather long. If you take the time to read it, you're gonna say, boy, I feel like I read this before, because you did. A lot of this material comes right out of the facility plan. These things all, as we said many times, these things are all tied together. They all use the same basic information. This just kind of gives you an overview of the secret process in general and of the environmental impact statement. There is nothing new here. This is all material that we've talked about before. This is very long. I think we're probably gonna be a little bit more concise and maybe for readability, provide some summaries and some other things. But I did want to really quickly just mention for the secret process where we go from here. So for variance, we have the information that we need. We'll be putting that together, working with staff and getting that resubmitted back to DEC so that review can continue. For EIS, we now have, again, that variance information is being put in the EIS. We have some cleanup work to do in terms of like where the tables go and the pictures and the maps and all those kinds of things that we were waiting until we want to mess up all of the EIS, the text is about 350 pages. So we want to make sure we have all of that material together before we package it. We will be sending it to staff and legal, probably in the next 2 weeks, I would say, for review. And then from there, once it's been through that process, it'll come back, as we discussed before. I think the plan is it'll come back to this group for a recommendation to fiscal services, who would then recommend it to the full legislature. And what's being recommended would be the draft environmental impact statement being complete and ready for public review. Public review process would include at a minimum circulation of those documents to the involved agencies and availability of those documents for review by the public. Hearings are not required. Do strongly recommend hearing and a comment period on this document that would be conducted over the course of perhaps 30 to 45 days, something like that. And then at the close of the comment period and the receipt of all the comments, those all come back to us. We compile them and we address substantive questions or the need for additional documentation to create a complete review. And then we're kind of nearing the end of the environmental review process, but that's just kind of the overall
Okay,
discussion.
good. And, do you know, do you have a feeling about what the timeline is on for this?
So like our staff's objective is by early June to get documentation to county staff and legal for review. Then it will really be how long does it take to get through county staff and legal. Again, a lot of this material, it's not whole cloth, it's not new. It's things that come out of the facility plan and other published documentation, the variants, other things have all been reviewed. So really it will depend on when we get feedback back from county staff. We will get on as soon as we possibly can so that we can make one of your meetings, so we can then start that process of your meeting to fiscal services to move forward.
Lead it.
The legislature is the lead agency for this project, so they would be the ones taking the actions.
Okay, good. That was the two items that I was gonna bring up, and let I check with you first. How did the sampling come back? Just a quick question on that. That was for the plant itself.
It was speedy sampling, it was pretty much as we expected it to be, nothing
Is
exciting.
that expecting to be good or bad?
So what we're really doing is just simply presence or absence. It is a constituent there, and if so, what's in it? How much is there? Is it
So
there?
you got the measurements on all the things, okay,
So it was as expected, nothing shocking, nothing exciting.
all right. All right, we're gonna move on then. Any word on the sewer readers update,
I know you're gonna ask that, and I didn't check today. I've been away for a week.
Yeah.
So I'll find out.
was about to go out to bid, right? Or did they go out to? bid?
No, we're done.
Yeah, they're-
We're just, it's up to us to
Just-
order them and install
Okay.
Thank you.
And,
them. Yeah, no, right, that's all been done.
Yeah, tremendous amount of savings came in,
yeah,
doing it this way, the rebid, all
and you're gonna have some team do the work.
Yeah.
Yeah. That brought in a lot of
Let's get the
savings
status of
to
that.
taxpayer and ratepayers. All right, and then,
Just any idea as to the delivery time, what we're talking about relative to
So they need
that?
to know. I was in meetings all
Yeah.
morning. I couldn't get to an
Now,
update.
that'd be something
My
else.
first day back.
yeah, if you can grab it for the next meeting, or if you hear anything that's,
We can send an email.
I'll get you an update.
yeah.
Someone says
Disseminate.
something.
You send it to Kelly and she can send it to all the committee. And then I was looking for a update on our new project over at the Village of South Blooming Grove, but I don't know if anybody, Bob, you've been away, I don't know if you heard anything. The last I know is that
What do you mean,
resolution was passed in December. And then there was a public notice of the intent to go for bonding on the project.
Correct.
And that was maybe 3 weeks, 4 weeks ago, and I haven't heard any updates from them. I just wondered if you guys did. If not, I'll try to get
Well,
one and then keep everybody
I
updated on
think
it.
Katie's a good one. to follow up on it.
Yeah. Okay,
He seems to get answers faster than I do.
okay. All right, now Kelly, do you know when the next date is for the next meeting?
June 20th.
June 20th, and we will get together again and hopefully keep moving this giant snapping turtle. Moves slowly. but they do get there. They live a long time.
And it has a nasty bite.
And it has a nasty bite.
I think we said
They
a long
bite
time,
fast.
we probably do not sneak up on you.
Yes.
All right, with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
All in
Aye.
favor? Aye. All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Mary Beth. Moving down, and let me just turn this off before Joe.